The Rebel Capitalist Show.
With this time frame, I wanted to get your opinion not only on the food prices. That was a fascinating deep dive there, but I also wanted to go into this whole Russia-Ukraine issue because maybe you can share your background in the military. And I think you most likely have some insights here as well, just like you had insights with the food.
Well, it's interesting. My my closest insight, my wife is Ukrainian, and her family, her family's in Kiev right now. And so literally every day people ask me, how are they doing? Is everything okay? You know, and you know, this is what I'm about to say may come as shocking or seem almost callous. They're fine. And you know, not to diminish what's happening there. Obviously, it's a big deal and remarkably stupid across the board. But I think it's, to me, the most important thing for people to understand. There is certainly an enormous amount of suffering going on. Again, not in no way trying to diminish that kind of suffering, but there's definitely a lot of things that are overblown or not being accurately reported. I don't know if it's just fog of war or if it's a deliberate intent to whip up more hysteria over something. But I mean, this you know, this sort of anti-Russia backlash that's been spreading across the world, you know, I mean, there's a huge difference between Vladimir Putin and just some Russian guy, you know, who not even living there anymore, you know, but this extremely, frankly, racist backlash against individual, you know, human beings. And you know, most
did
interesting.
You see Wimbledon banned the Russian tennis guys?
I was just going to say that, and then the explanation, you know, the executive director of the All England club, which runs the tournament, said, you know, we know this is going to, you know, this is going to cause a lot of suffering to, you know, individual, you know, these human beings, you know, that are going to suffer because of this policy, you know, but we feel this is something that we have to do. It's like, wasn't that Putin's logic though? Like we know we're going to cause these innocent people to suffer, and I'm just going to do it anyways. You know, it's like you can't sort of rise above that and say we are going to separate these individual Russian from Vladimir Putin because we clearly understand they have nothing to do with this, you know, egomaniacal, totalitarian, crazed nut job. And I will go on record personally. I believe that he never, all along the way, never had any intent to actually invade. Back in December, when he was, oh, look at me, I've got my army here on the border, and everybody started making this big deal about it. Putin is a guy with nothing to lose. He's, you know, basically dictator for life. He's the most powerful person in the country. He can do whatever he wants, and so clearly he's been able to get away with it. So I mean, this guy with absolutely nothing to lose, whose only desire is to make sure that he never looks weak. On the other hand, I think you have the president of the United States with everything to lose, who knows that his back is against the corner after that shameful, disgraceful debacle in Afghanistan. People falling from airplanes. I mean, the most humiliating thing I think anybody could ever see coming from the United States of America. And now here's a guy, whereas Putin is, you know, to make sure he never looks weak. Now here's a guy with everything to lose, the presidency, his agenda, his party's, you know, hopes. He's got everything to lose, and he's desperate to look strong. And you put those two forces together, you know, somebody with everything to lose versus somebody with nothing to lose. Somebody that's desperate to not look weak versus somebody that's desperate to look strong, you know, with a kind of powder keg situation like this, and it's not really a great outcome. And if you step back and look at it, I think rationally, truly rationally, you know, kind of dial it back to sort of December. You know, if your sort of arch enemy, bitter rival is doing something like this, you know, I mean, even invasions are expensive. Annexation is expensive. You know, the annexation of Crimea was incredibly expensive. the reunification of East and West Germany was extremely expensive, particularly for the West German taxpayers. I mean, these things are for the more powerful place, they're incredibly expensive. And so if your arch rival is doing something that is incredibly expensive, ergo economically irrational, do you really make a big fuss about that? In the same way, if the United States decided that, they were massing troops on the border of Mexico and were threatening to invade the state of Nuevo Leon in Mexico, would China go, no, you're not allowed to do that? Or would they go, oh my God, I can't believe they're going to spend all that money invading, Nuevo Leon? Like, that's going to be so expensive. Oh my God, that's going to be so expensive. And the Chinese will go, okay, you do you. If that's what you want to do, if you want to waste hundreds of billions of dollars doing something that's not in your economic interest. And so if you think about it sort of rationally, you almost just sit back and don't, if the guy's just throwing a temper tantrum because he's trying to call, attention to the fact that he doesn't want NATO on his border and all of those things, and instead you sort of escalate the conflict where his back's against the wall and you leave him two options: either look weak and withdraw, or just say, all right, I'm just going to do it because I don't want to look weak. I mean, for a guy with nothing to lose, whose only priority is to not look weak, this is the outcome that you get. And so I feel like this was a war like World War I, where you had a lot of people who were supposed to be experts, who had decades of foreign policy experience, who completely underestimated one another, who completely missed all the signals, who should have known better but didn't. And now this is what you get. And everybody on the planet is suffering because, yes, it is a major contribution to inflation, and everybody has to deal with it. So I think this was a completely avoidable conflict. And I think it's one that is clearly irrational from an economic perspective, completely immoral, as well, obviously on the Putin side. To punish individual Russians is also immoral. And as a final point, like, sorry, but there's the suffering is clearly widespread, but you can't believe everything you read. I mean, I talk to my in-laws, and my wife talks to the family, every day, and obviously we get a completely different side of things about what's happening there. I guess one small thing that I'll say, which to them, one of the things that they're most concerned about is the fact that the government just went and handed out, a bunch of, weapons to like thugs and street gangs and stuff like that. I mean, they just said, hey, here's a gun. They didn't care who they gave this stuff to. They just said, okay, now we're all on the same side here. But now there's, there's roving gangs now running around with U.S. provided weaponry that, and they're sold. I mean, people are getting robbed and people are getting kind of held up and being accused of being a Russian spy. All sorts of things. I mean, honestly, like, they're more concerned about that, than a lot of other things. And it's just the sorts of things that just don't really ever go reported. The only thing that people want to report is this, this hero narrative: Russia bad, Ukraine good, that there are, like anything, there are just a lot of nuances to it that are just not really being reported. So I just get a totally different side of it.
What did your wife and in-laws think of the government, the Ukrainian government, prior to this?
Not much. This is a people that has continually elected corrupt fraudsters. So they had, years in 2004, they had the Orange Revolution, where they had the guy, Yanukovych versus Yushchenko. Yushchenko was poisoned by Yanukovych. They had people in the streets rioting. They had political revolution in this country every couple of years. They have consistently failed to establish a sensible government that people can trust and rely on. So you had this, Yushchenko finally won the election and was made president. His ass was thrown out of office. They drummed him out. And then the next guy they elected was Yanukovych, who was the guy they were protesting against in 2004. So then Yanukovych came to power, spent years in power. Turned out he was a corrupt dictator. And finally, several years ago, they went and stormed the presidential palace and found that, he was sitting on a golden toilet and just had stolen all the money from people. So they threw him out, not before having another political revolution. There were snipers in the streets and all, just crazy stuff. Then they put this guy Poroshenko in, who was a local billionaire. It was a confectionery business. He had like candies and stuff. And I thought, well, he's already a billionaire, so he's not going to steal from us. Well, he did. So he was corrupt as well. And then then now they elected this other guy who was a stand-up comic before, think like more like Bill Maher and Les Gallagher. Clearly an intelligent guy. So people were just kind of like, all right, I guess we'll see. And now, he's clearly, there's been a lot of things that have been very manipulative, and he banned a lot of opposition parties and, all sorts of stuff that's just, and he goes and gives these speeches and says, this could be my last day to live. And, all this kind of very dramatic stuff. And of course, the only acceptable response is to give him a standing ovation, and everybody's got to heap praise and, medals and prizes on him and all this sort of, it is with this, he's always doing speeches and his camouflage and his olive drab t-shirts and all this sort of stuff. And it's like at a certain point, you've got to look through some of that and just try and understand the facts as they are. And yes, there's a lot of suffering and bombing and just really morally reprehensible stuff. And I think a lot of war crimes clearly being committed. But it's not being presented exactly as it really is. And wow, what a surprise from the media.